My dad smashed my jaw for talking back. Mom laughed. That's what you get for being useless. Dad sneered. Trigger warning. This story contains themes of child abuse, domestic violence, and trauma. Please prioritize your well-being while listening. Can you imagine being trapped in a gilded cage, watching your life disappear, knowing the people who should protect you are actually the ones tearing you down? That night, when my jaw shattered under my father's fist because I finally dared to speak my truth, my mother just laughed. That's what you get for being useless, she sneered, and my father, towering over me, just snarled, maybe now you'll learn to keep that gutter mouth shut. But even as the pain blinded me, a slow, terrifying smile spread across my bloody face. They had no idea what was coming. And maybe, just maybe, my story can help someone else. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect family. I mean, truly. We lived in this beautiful two-story colonial house near Boston, manicured lawn, white picket fence, practically a postcard. My dad, Frank Thompson, was a high-powered attorney, the kind of guy everyone in town respected. He donated to charities, sponsored local teams, always had a profound-sounding quote ready for community gatherings. And my mom, Eleanor, she was this immaculate event planner, all perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes, flawless makeup. Together, they projected an image of success and happiness that everyone envied. But let me tell you, images can be deceiving. Our perfect family portrait was nothing but a carefully constructed lie. Looking back, there were these few, precious good memories, scattered like rare gems in a heap of rubble. Like my 10th birthday. My dad had won a big case, so he was in an unusually good mood, and my mom, well, she'd taken her medication correctly that week. They rented a petting zoo for our backyard, invited all my classmates. For one day, I felt like a normal kid with normal parents who loved me. My dad even hugged me that day. I could count the number of times that happened on one hand. Another golden memory was our only beach vacation when I was 12, a week at Cape Cod. For those 7 days, the constant tension just evaporated in the salt air. Dad actually left his work phone in the hotel room, and Mom genuinely laughed, not that practiced social laugh she usually used. I collected seashells every morning, and Dad helped me build this elaborate sandcastle that lasted 2 days against the tide. I still have one perfect scallop shell from that trip, hidden in my desk drawer. A physical reminder that things could be different. At school, I was always a straight-A student. I had to be. Anything less would trigger consequences I learned to avoid at all costs. But my real passion was writing. I filled journal after journal with stories, poems, dreams of a different life. I wrote about faraway places, brave characters who stood up for themselves. My English teachers always praised my work, but I never showed it to my parents. Instinctively, I knew they'd see it as a threat, a sign that I had thoughts and dreams beyond their control. I dreamed of attending college far from home. New York University was my top choice, renowned journalism program, and more importantly, hundreds of miles from Boston. I imagined walking through Greenwich Village, blending in, becoming anonymous, finally free to be whoever I wanted. I secretly researched scholarships at the school library, knowing my father would never pay for me to escape his reach. Olivia Bennett was my only true friend, the one who knew fragments of the truth about my home life. We met in 7th grade, before I'd fully learned to hide everything. She caught me crying in the bathroom one day after my dad had thrown away my art project, calling it wasteful nonsense. Olivia never pushed for details, but she offered this silent support that kept me sane. We had sleepovers at her house whenever possible, these small respites of normalcy that helped me remember what a real family could be like. Her parents were kind, gentle people who argued respectfully and never, ever raised their voices, much less their hands. The contrast to my own home was stark and heartbreaking. Miss Harrison, my 11th grade English teacher, was the first adult who saw something in my writing that hinted at my hidden reality. After reading a creative writing assignment where I'd thinly disguised my situation as fiction, she asked me to stay after class. "You have a remarkable talent, Sophia," she told me, her eyes full of concern. "The emotions in your writing feel very authentic." You know you can talk to me if you ever need to, right? I just nodded. I wasn't ready to speak the truth aloud, but her recognition of my talent planted a seed of hope. Maybe my words could eventually become my escape. I became adept at creating a public persona that revealed nothing of my private pain. I smiled at the right times, participated in the right extracurriculars, maintained the precise level of social engagement that wouldn't arouse suspicion, but also wouldn't invite too much scrutiny. I was friendly, but not close with most classmates. Attended school events, but always left early with a polite excuse. I became invisible in the most visible way possible, hiding in plain sight. In my mind, I constructed elaborate fantasies of freedom. I imagined turning 18 and walking out the door, never looking back. I dreamed of a small apartment somewhere, noisy and vibrant, with neighbors who didn't know my name and didn't care about my comings and goings. A life where I could speak without calculating every word, laugh loudly without fear, simply exist without constantly monitoring the emotional temperature of those around me. But even as I dreamed, I understood the invisible chains that bound me: financial dependence, a lifetime of conditioned fear, and that insidious voice in my head that whispered my parents might be right. Maybe I was ungrateful. Maybe I did deserve it. Maybe the outside world would be even worse. But hope, hope is a stubborn thing. It grows in the darkest places, finding nourishment in the smallest cracks of light. And despite everything, hope flickered inside me, a tiny flame I protected fiercely against the constant winds trying to extinguish it. Someday, I told myself. Someday, I will be free. The first clear sign that my home was different from others came when I was 14. I'd always sensed it, felt the underlying tension permeating our house like a toxic gas. But that day crystallized everything. I brought home my report card, nervous, but quietly proud. All A's, except for biology, where I'd gotten a B+. The teacher was notoriously tough. Most students had scored much lower. I thought my parents would be pleased, or at least not upset. I found my father in his home office. I handed him the report card with slightly trembling hands, watching his face. He scanned it slowly, his face darkening when he reached the B+. Without warning, his hand shot out, striking my cheek with enough force to make me stumble backward. "What is this?" he demanded, shaking the paper in my face. "Do you think mediocrity is acceptable in this house? Do you think the Thompsons settle for less than excellence?" My mother appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Instead of defending me, she just shook her head. "You need to try harder, Sophia," she said coldly. "Don't disappoint your father like this again." That night, I cried silently into my pillow, careful not to make a sound. It wasn't the physical pain that hurt the most. It was the crushing realization that my mother would never protect me. In that moment, I understood I was completely alone in my own home. The control escalated gradually after that. My father started checking my phone regularly, reading my texts, monitoring my calls. He installed parental controls that alerted him to every website I visited. My curfew was non-negotiable: 6 p.m. on weekdays, 8 p.m. on weekends, no exceptions. He began vetting my friends, prohibiting me from spending time with anyone he deemed unsuitable, or from families he considered beneath our social standing. One particularly humiliating incident happened during a study group at Olivia's house. 5 of us were preparing for final exams. Without warning, my father appeared at the door, having tracked my phone's location. He didn't even bother with social niceties, just announced I needed to come home immediately. My classmates stared in awkward silence as I gathered my things, face burning with shame. "I told you to ask permission for any activities," he said in the car, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Study groups are a waste of time. Kids just gossip and distract each other." "But Dad, we were actually studying. Miss Peterson assigned us to work together." I tried to explain. "Don't talk back to me," he snapped. "Your grades are your responsibility alone. I don't want to hear about group projects. You will study at home where I can monitor your progress." That night, I started my secret diary. I stole a notebook from school and carefully pried up a loose floorboard under my bed for a hiding spot. In those pages, I wrote everything I couldn't say, every hurt, every fear, every small and large injustice. The diary became my confidant, the only place I could be truly honest. I wrote about the unfairness of their rules, my dreams of escape, and increasingly detailed accounts of the escalating abuse. I became skilled at lying, creating elaborate cover stories for bruises or my frequent absences from social events. I learned to smile convincingly while saying, "Oh, I couldn't attend the birthday party because of family obligations," never revealing the obligation was my father's decree that I stay home. I perfected the art of wearing long sleeves in warm weather and makeup to cover the occasional marks. I became an actress, playing the role of normal teenager with such conviction that sometimes I almost believed it myself. One night, I woke to the sound of shouting from my parents' bedroom. This wasn't unusual, but something about the intensity made me creep to my door and listen. Through the wall, I could hear my mother sobbing and my father's low, threatening voice. There was a sharp sound, like a slap, and then my mother's crying became muffled. In that moment, I realized she wasn't just failing to protect me. She was also a victim herself. It didn't excuse her enabling behavior or her occasional participation in my abuse, but it helped me understand her a little better. She was trapped, too, in her own way. That revelation brought a new dimension to my fear. If my mother, an adult with presumably more resources and options than I had, couldn't escape, what hope did I have? For the first time, I seriously considered running away. I researched youth shelters online using school computers to avoid detection. But the reality was daunting. I had no money, nowhere to go, and the terrifying prospect that my father, with his legal connections, would find me and bring me back, making everything worse. So I stayed, adapting and surviving like a creature evolving to live in a hostile environment. I developed an almost supernatural awareness of my father's moods, learning to read the smallest signs, from how he placed his keys on the table to the rhythm of his footsteps on the stairs. I knew when to make myself scarce, when to be useful but invisible, when a rare window of relative safety might open. It was exhausting, this constant vigilance, but necessary for survival. My mother's behavior became increasingly erratic. Some days she'd be almost kind, slipping me an extra snack or warning me with a look that my father was in a dangerous mood. Other days she seemed to resent my very existence, criticizing everything from my posture to my breathing, as though my presence was an affront to her. I could never predict which version of her I'd encounter from one day to the next. As my 16th birthday approached, I allowed myself a small hope that things might improve. 16 felt significant, a step closer to adulthood and freedom. Maybe my parents would recognize this milestone, loosen the restrictions a bit, acknowledge my growing maturity. It was a foolish hope, but hope is often foolish in the face of experience. The day came and went without celebration. My father was away on a business trip, and my mother spent the day in bed with one of her headaches, which I'd begun to suspect were related to her secret drinking. Olivia brought me a cupcake at lunch with a single candle that we lit in the bathroom stall, away from the no-fire rules. That small act of defiance and friendship meant more to me than any elaborate party could have. That night, writing in my diary by flashlight, I made myself a promise. I would survive 2 more years in this house. I would excel at school, secure scholarships, and find a way out. I would not let them break me. I just had to hold on a little longer. By the time I turned 17, the pressure had intensified to an almost unbearable degree. Junior year brought the stress of college applications, SAT prep, and increasingly important decisions about my future. For most of my classmates, this was a time of excitement mixed with normal anxiety. For me, it was a battleground where my desperate desire for independence clashed directly with my father's determination to control every aspect of my life. "You will apply to Boston University and Suffolk Law," my father announced one evening at dinner, not even phrasing it as a question. "Pre-law track. I've already spoken to Dean Richardson about your application. You can live at home and commute. No need for dorm expenses." My stomach dropped. The casual way he'd planned my entire future without any input from me made me feel physically ill. No New York. No journalism. No escape. "But Dad, I was thinking about journalism programs," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been working on the school newspaper, and my advisor thinks I have real potential. His face darkened. Journalism? A dying field full of liberal propaganda peddlers. No daughter of mine is wasting my money on such nonsense. The law is a respectable profession with actual earning potential. Frank is right, Sophia, my mother chimed in. Always the loyal echo. Think practically. Journalism is for people who couldn't get into real professional programs. I should have backed down then. Experience had taught me that disagreement only led to pain. But something about this moment, about having the next 4 years of my life, maybe my entire future, decided without my consent, made something snap inside me. I don't want to be a lawyer, I said, my voice stronger than I intended. I want to write. I want to go to New York. I've been researching scholarships, so it wouldn't even cost you anything. The silence that followed was deafening. My father set down his fork with deliberate slowness, a gesture I'd learned to fear. Go to your room, he said quietly. We will discuss your attitude adjustment later. Later came 3 hours after, when my mother had gone to bed with her pills and wine. He entered my room without knocking, closing the door behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded more threatening than a slam would have. The discussion that followed left me with bruised ribs and a split lip. I learned he had found the scholarship applications I'd hidden in my desk drawer. I learned that defiance would not be tolerated. I learned that dreams were luxuries I was not entitled to. The next morning, my mother eyed my swollen face over breakfast, but said nothing. I applied concealer carefully before school, an art I had unfortunately perfected over the years. Mr. Davis, my guidance counselor, noticed something was wrong during our scheduled meeting about college applications. His eyes lingered on the bruise I'd failed to completely cover near my jawline. Sophia, is everything all right at home? He asked carefully. Fine, I replied automatically. I walked into a door handle yesterday. I'm such a klutz sometimes. He didn't look convinced. You know, you can talk to me if you're having problems. Anything you say would be confidential. I almost broke then. Something in his kind eyes made me want to spill everything, to finally let an adult into the horror of my daily existence. But fear held me back. My father was a well-connected attorney. Who would believe me over him? And even if someone did, what then? Foster care for a few months until I turned 18? Or worse, intervention that failed and left me still in that house with parents who would be even more vengeful? Really, Mr. Davis, everything is fine. I'm just stressed about college applications. He nodded slowly. Well, my door is always open. About those applications, have you considered Northwestern? Their journalism program is excellent, and I think you'd be a strong candidate for their merit scholarships. I felt a surge of gratitude for this small acknowledgement of my actual interests, even as I knew I'd never be allowed to apply. I began searching for part-time jobs I could reach by public transportation. If I could save some money secretly, maybe I could afford a bus ticket and first month's rent somewhere after graduation. But my father quickly put an end to that plan. Your job is to focus on your studies, he declared. When I tentatively mentioned wanting to work at the local bookstore, he snapped, I won't have you distracted by minimum wage nonsense when you should be preparing for law school. My mother's drinking worsened during this time. I'd find empty wine bottles hidden in the recycling bin under other trash, or tucked behind her gardening supplies in the garage. Some evenings she was coherent and coldly critical. Other nights, she slurred her words and either became weepily affectionate or viciously mean, with no middle ground. Increasingly, she seemed to view me as competition rather than her child, making sniping comments about my youth or appearance. On her worst nights, she actively encouraged my father's anger, pointing out perceived infractions I'd committed during the day. One afternoon, my PE teacher, Miss Ramirez, noticed bruising on my back when I was changing for class. I'd been careless, forgetting about the marks my father had left 2 days before when he'd shoved me against the staircase railing. Sophia, wait a moment, she said as the other girls filed out. How did you get those bruises? Fell during hiking with my cousins this weekend, I lied smoothly. I tumbled down a rocky section of the trail. She looked skeptical. Those don't look like falling bruises. They look like someone hurt you. No, really. I'm just clumsy. Always have been. Ask anyone. I forced a laugh. hating how easily the lies came now. She didn't press further, but I noticed her watching me more carefully after that. It was both comforting and terrifying to know someone was paying attention. My friendship with Olivia became increasingly difficult to maintain. My father began to suspect she knew too much, that she was a potential threat to the family image. "That Bennett girl seems to have a bad influence on you," he remarked after forbidding me from attending a study session at her house. "Her parents are divorced, you know. Broken home, broken values." The irony of his statement would have been laughable if it weren't so tragic. Our home was far more broken than Olivia's could ever be. Then came the discovery that would change everything. I was searching for a stapler in my father's home office, a room I was generally forbidden to enter. In a drawer that was partially open, I saw a hotel receipt. This alone wasn't unusual, as my father traveled frequently. But the dates caught my attention. He'd claimed to be in Chicago that weekend for a conference, but the hotel was in Boston, less than 20 minutes from our house. And the receipt showed charges for 2 guests, with room service for 2, and a bottle of champagne. My father was having an affair. This realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Not because I had any particular reverence for my parents' marriage, which I knew to be as toxic as every other aspect of our household, but because it was a secret. A secret I now possessed. Information that could potentially be dangerous. I carefully replaced the receipt exactly as I'd found it and left the office, my heart pounding. This knowledge felt like a time bomb. I had no immediate plans to use it, but its very existence in my mind felt dangerous. If my father ever suspected, I knew the consequences would be severe. That night, I added this new information to my diary, hiding it in my secret spot with extra care. It wasn't so much ammunition as it was insurance. A small piece of leverage in a situation where I had none. I didn't know yet how or if I would ever use it, but in a strange way, it gave me a tiny sense of power in a situation where I had been completely powerless for so long. As senior year approached, the walls seemed to close in further. My carefully constructed plans for escape were being systematically dismantled by my father's iron control. But the diary continued to grow, documenting every incident, every bruise, every cutting word. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and pain, a different emotion was beginning to take root. Not just fear or sadness or resignation, but anger. White-hot, clarifying anger that would eventually become my salvation. The day I graduated high school should have been triumphant. Despite everything, I'd maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA, earned National Honor Society membership, and received recognition for my writing. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of polyester gowns and speeches about bright futures. I accepted my diploma to polite applause, scanning the audience to find Olivia's parents giving me a thumbs up from their seats. My own parents sat stiffly in the front row reserved for families of honor students, my father checking his watch repeatedly, my mother maintaining her camera-ready smile that never reached her eyes. That evening, my father had arranged a graduation dinner at our home. Not for my benefit, of course, but because appearances mattered. Extended family, my father's law partners, select neighbors, all invited to celebrate the accomplishment of Frank Thompson's daughter, the future law student, the perfect extension of his own success. Aunt Judith, my father's sister, hugged me tightly when she arrived. "So proud of you, sweetheart," she whispered. "Top of your class, just like your dad was." Uncle Robert, my mother's brother, pressed a card into my hand. "A little something to start your college fund," he said with a wink. "Though I hear your father has it all mapped out for you already." The dining room table was set with the good china, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier. My mother had hired caterers, unwilling to risk her reputation on her own inconsistent cooking skills. I played my part perfectly, the grateful daughter, the academic achiever, the girl with the bright future carefully planned by loving parents. "Sophia has already been accepted to Boston University," my father announced over dessert, raising his glass in a toast. Following in the family tradition, pre-law track. We couldn't be prouder. The guests murmured their approval and congratulations. No one noticed my hands trembling slightly as I raised my water glass in acknowledgement. "Such a sensible choice," Mrs. Harrington, our neighbor, commented. So many young people today want to run off to some faraway school and waste their parents' money. How nice that you're staying close to home. Sophia has always been such an obedient daughter, my mother added, her words slightly slurred from too many glasses of wine. Never gives us any trouble. The evening dragged on, a performance where everyone played their assigned roles. By 11 o'clock, the last guests had departed, leaving behind gift bags and congratulation cards I hadn't been allowed to open yet. My father insisted all gifts be approved by him first, a control tactic disguised as parental supervision. The house felt eerily quiet after the forced joviality. I began clearing dessert plates, while my mother stumbled upstairs to bed, the strain of maintaining her perfect hostess persona having exhausted her. My father loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch in the kitchen, watching me work. "Leave those," he said. "The cleaning service will handle it tomorrow." I set down the stack of plates carefully. "Dad, I need to talk to you about college." His expression hardened immediately. "There is nothing to discuss. The arrangements have been made." "But I haven't accepted Boston University's offer," I said, surprised by my own boldness. "I've been accepted to New York University with a partial scholarship. I want to study journalism." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. My father set his scotch glass down with deliberate care. "You did what?" His voice was dangerously soft. "I applied to other schools. I got into NYU." I swallowed hard but continued. "I'm 18 now. I have the right to choose my own path." "Rights?" He laughed. A harsh sound, entirely devoid of humor. "You want to talk about rights after everything we've provided for you? The roof over your head, the food on your plate, the opportunities you've been given. And this is how you repay us?" With defiance and disrespect. I took a step back, recognizing the dangerous glint in his eyes, but something had broken loose inside me. Perhaps it was the culmination of years of suppressed feelings, or maybe I simply had nothing left to lose. "You haven't provided opportunities," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "You've provided a prison. You've never asked what I want or who I am. You just decided everything for me." His face contorted with rage. In that moment, he dropped all pretense of being the respected attorney, the pillar of the community. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm with bruising force. "How dare you?" he hissed. "After everything I've sacrificed for this family, you ungrateful little..." The first blow caught me on the cheekbone, snapping my head back. The second connected with my ribs, driving the air from my lungs. I tried to protect myself, raising my arms defensively, but he was stronger, fueled by a rage that had been simmering for years. "You will go where I tell you," he shouted, punctuating each word with another blow. "You will study what I tell you. You will be who I tell you to be." I tasted blood in my mouth, felt the room spinning around me. Through the haze of pain, I saw my mother standing in the doorway, summoned by the commotion. Her face was expressionless, empty of the maternal concern any normal mother would feel seeing her child being beaten. The final blow came as I was already crumbling to the floor. My father's fist connected with my jaw with a sickening crack that reverberated through my skull. The pain was blinding, immediate, overwhelming. I felt something shift, break inside my mouth. Blood poured from my lips as I collapsed fully to the kitchen tiles. Through swollen eyes, I looked up at my mother, silently pleading for help. Instead, she laughed, a brittle, wine-soaked sound. "That's what you get for being useless," she said, swaying slightly in the doorway. "Always thinking you're so special, so different from us." My father stood over me, breathing heavily, straightening his cuffs as though he'd just completed some minor task rather than assaulting his own daughter. "Maybe now you'll learn to keep that gutter mouth shut," he said coldly. "Go clean yourself up, and in the morning, we will proceed with the Boston University enrollment as planned. This rebellion ends now." They left me there on the kitchen floor, my father retiring to his study, and my mother weaving her way upstairs. I lay still for what felt like hours, the cool tile against my cheek providing the only relief from the throbbing pain that encompassed my entire being. Eventually, I managed to drag myself to the downstairs bathroom. The face that looked back at me from the mirror was almost unrecognizable. My left eye was swollen shut, my lips split in multiple places, and my jaw visibly misaligned. I could barely open my mouth. And when I tried, The pain was excruciating. I knew without medical training that my jaw was broken. A normal parent would have rushed me to the emergency room. My parents simply went to bed, secure in the knowledge that I couldn't tell anyone what had happened. Who would believe me over the respected attorney Frank Thompson? And even if someone did, what then? I crawled to my bedroom, each movement sending fresh waves of agony through my body. I couldn't cry, the act of sobbing too painful for my broken face. Instead, I lay in the darkness, a strange calm settling over me. They had gone too far this time. The physical evidence was undeniable, and something had shifted inside me along with the bones of my jaw. As I drifted in and out of consciousness that night, a resolution formed in my mind. They thought they had broken me, finally crushed my will completely. But in that moment of extreme pain, I found clarity. I had nothing left to lose, no reason to comply, to pretend, to endure one more day of this existence. Through the haze of pain, I smiled, though the movement sent daggers of agony through my face. They had no idea what was coming. They thought they had won, but they had just set in motion their own downfall. Tomorrow would begin the end of their reign of terror. I just had to survive the night. For the next 2 weeks, I existed in a fog of pain. My jaw was definitely broken, though I had no official diagnosis. My father refused to take me to a hospital, claiming I'd fallen down the stairs and just needed time to heal. My mother provided over-the-counter pain medication. That barely took the edge off the agony. I survived on liquids sucked through a straw, unable to chew or sometimes even to speak. The physical pain was a constant, grinding, inescapable presence, but somehow it clarified my thinking rather than clouding it. During those painful days of recovery, I formulated my plan with methodical precision. I'd been researching escape options for years, but always with vague timelines and uncertainty. Now, I had a definite deadline and absolute conviction. I would never spend another night in that house once my jaw healed enough for me to execute my plan. My first task was to reconnect with Olivia, which proved challenging since my father had confiscated my phone after the accident, claiming I needed to research summer reading assignments. I convinced my mother to let me visit the public library. There, using the free computers, I created a new email address and sent Olivia a message explaining I needed her help, but couldn't provide details yet. I asked her to check this email daily and told her I'd contact her again soon. Olivia's response came within hours. No questions, just unconditional support. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I'm here for you. My next step was gathering evidence. Years of abuse had taught me that my word alone would not be enough against my father's reputation and connections. I needed irrefutable proof. Using an old digital camera I found in the storage closet, I documented my injuries daily, creating a visual timeline of my healing jaw and other bruises. I wrote detailed accounts of the graduation night incident and previous abuses in a new diary, which I kept hidden in a hollowed-out book on my shelf. I even started recording conversations on a small voice recorder I purchased with cash from the emergency $20 Olivia had slipped me at the library. I carried it constantly, capturing my father's threats and my mother's enabling comments. The first time I played back a recording of my father screaming, "Try to tell anyone about your little accident and you won't survive the next one. You worthless little bitch," a chill ran through me at hearing the raw hatred in his voice from an objective perspective. Had I really been living with this monster my entire life? 3 weeks after graduation, when I could speak without excruciating pain, I made a secret visit to my former English teacher, Miss Harrison. School was out for summer, but I knew she taught a writing workshop at the community center on Tuesdays. I waited until she was alone after class. "Sophia," she exclaimed upon seeing me, her expression shifting from surprise to horror as she took in my still healing face. "Oh my God, what happened to you?" For the first time, I told someone the complete truth. The words poured out of me, halting at first, then in a rush that couldn't be contained. Miss Harrison listened without interruption, her face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, she reached for my hand. "I suspected something was wrong," she said softly. "Your writing always had an undercurrent of pain that seemed too real to be fictional. But I never imagined it was this severe. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was afraid," I admitted. "Afraid no one would believe me." Afraid of what would happen if someone tried to help but failed. Afraid of him. Miss Harrison helped me connect with Sarah Jenkins, a lawyer who specialized in domestic violence cases and had herself escaped an abusive marriage in her 20s. Sarah agreed to meet me secretly at the library, reviewing my evidence and outlining my options. "Your documentation is excellent," she told me, examining the photographs and recordings. "And since you're 18, you have more options than a minor would. We can file for a restraining order immediately." "Not yet," I said. "I need more time to prepare. Once I make this move, I can never go back. I need to be completely ready." Sarah understood. She helped me create a safety plan and connected me with resources for abuse survivors. She also discovered something unexpected while researching my father. Frank Thompson has been under investigation by the Bar Association for ethical violations, she revealed during our third meeting. Misappropriation of client funds, conflicts of interest. It's been kept quiet, but there's a substantial case building against him. This could explain his escalating violence. Men like your father often become more dangerous when they feel their control slipping in other areas of their life. This information was both terrifying and useful. If my father was already under scrutiny professionally, my allegations might find more receptive ears. But it also meant he was potentially more volatile than ever. Through Miss Harrison's connections, I secured an emergency application to NYU's journalism program, complete with a special circumstances scholarship for students in crisis situations. My academic record and writing samples were strong enough that the department chair made an exception to include me in the fall semester despite the late application. "Your personal statement was one of the most powerful I have ever read," Miss Harrison told me after speaking with her college friend in NYU's admissions office. "They want to help you, Sophia. You just need to hold on a little longer." Olivia became my lifeline during this preparation phase. Using library computers and occasionally borrowing her phone, we coordinated the logistics of my escape. She offered her family's guest room as a temporary safe house before I left for New York and began secretly storing some of my most important possessions at her home. Each time I visited the library, I would bring a small bag of irreplaceable items, from my journals to the shell from Cape Cod, passing them to Olivia in the biography section where security cameras had a blind spot. The date for my departure crystallized when I overheard my parents discussing plans for my father's birthday. They would host a dinner party at our home on July 15th, inviting colleagues, friends, and extended family. It would be the perfect opportunity, with witnesses present and my father unable to react with his usual violence without exposing himself. As the date approached, I finalized every detail. Sarah prepared the legal documents, ready to file for a restraining order the moment I was safely away. My packed bags were hidden at Olivia's house. My evidence was duplicated and stored in multiple secure locations. Miss Harrison arranged for a friend to drive me to New York the day after my escape. All the pieces were in place. The night before the birthday party, I barely slept. Not from fear, surprisingly, but from a strange, electric anticipation. For the first time in my life, I was taking control. I was choosing my own path. The bruises had faded, my jaw had healed enough that the misalignment was only noticeable if you were looking for it, and my resolve had never been stronger. I stood at my bedroom window as dawn broke, watching the neighborhood come to life. The joggers, the dog walkers, the sprinklers activating on perfectly manicured lawns. From the outside, nothing had changed. But inside this house, an earthquake was about to happen. By this time tomorrow, I would be gone from this place forever, and the carefully constructed facade of the Thompson family would lie in ruins. The thought brought not sadness or even anxiety, but a profound sense of peace. I was ready. The day of my father's birthday arrived with perfect weather, as though the universe itself approved of my plans. My mother spent the morning directing the catering staff, arranging flowers, polishing silver. My father worked in his study until noon, emerging occasionally to critique some aspect of the preparations before disappearing again behind his mahogany door. I moved through the house like a ghost, performing the tasks assigned to me with mechanical precision, while mentally rehearsing every step of what was to come. By 6 o'clock, guests began to arrive. My father's law partners with their immaculately dressed spouses. Neighbors bearing expensive bottles of wine. Family members I saw only at holidays, all exclaiming over how grown up I looked while not noticing, or choosing to ignore, the fading yellowish bruise along my jawline. I wore a modest blue dress my mother had selected, my hair arranged to partially cover the lingering evidence of my father's violence. I smiled and nodded at appropriate intervals, played the perfect daughter one final time. If anyone thought my quietness unusual, they attributed it to the natural reserve I had always displayed at these functions, never guessing at the storm brewing behind my calm exterior. Dinner progressed through multiple courses. My father, holding court at the head of the table, accepting compliments and well wishes with practiced humility. My mother, surprisingly sober for the occasion, maintained her role as the supportive spouse, laughing at his jokes and anticipating his needs before he could voice them. A toast, announced Howard Fitzgerald, my father's senior partner, raising his glass. To Frank Thompson, one of the finest attorneys I have ever had the privilege to work with. Your dedication to the firm and to justice itself is an inspiration to us all. If only they knew, I thought, mechanically raising my water glass. If only they could see what happens when the front door closes and the masks come off. After dinner, the party moved to the living room for cake and presents. I excused myself briefly, retrieving the small wrapped package I had hidden in my room. When I returned, my father was already opening gifts, his smile growing with each display of his colleagues' generosity. Expensive scotch, custom cufflinks, rare books. I waited until he had opened the last of the presented gifts before stepping forward. I have something for you, too, Dad, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. He looked surprised, perhaps because I had never shown initiative in gift-giving before, always signing my name to whatever my mother purchased on my behalf. Well, this is unexpected, he said with a chuckle that sounded warm to everyone but me. I recognized the dangerous undertone, the implicit question of what I thought I was doing, deviating from the script. I handed him the small box wrapped in silver paper with a blue ribbon. He opened it with deliberate movements, revealing a USB drive nestled in tissue paper. A flash drive, he said, confusion evident in his voice. It contains some memories I thought you might want to revisit, I replied. Would you like to see? Before he could refuse, I took the drive from his hand and walked to the entertainment center where our large television was connected to a computer system for streaming. I inserted the drive, feeling every eye in the room on my back. As I navigated to the first file, the screen filled with my battered face from the night after graduation. My jaw visibly misaligned, eyes swollen, lips split and crusted with dried blood. A collective gasp rose from the assembled guests. My father lunged toward the television, but froze as the next image appeared, showing the progression of my injuries over days, each dated and time-stamped. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, his public persona slipping as panic set in. I clicked again, and his own voice filled the room. A recording from 3 days after he broke my jaw. Asterisk, try to tell anyone about your little accident, and you will not survive the next one. Do you understand me, you worthless little bitch? Asterisk, the silence in the room was absolute. My mother had gone deathly pale, her hand clutching her throat as though she might be sick. My father's face contorted with rage, all pretense abandoned as he started toward me. You manipulative little liar, he snarled. Turn that off right now. Frank, what is going on? Howard asked, his voice filled with shock and growing suspicion. Nothing, my father snapped. A teenage tantrum. Doctored photos. Edited recordings. My daughter has always had an overactive imagination. Is that why you broke my jaw when I told you I wanted to study journalism instead of law? I asked calmly. Because of my imagination? Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. In the confusion, no one moved to answer it. I walked calmly to the front door and opened it to reveal 2 police officers standing on our perfect porch. Officers Ryan and Torres, the female officer, introduced herself. We received a call about a potential domestic violence situation at this address. That would be correct, I said, stepping back to allow them entry. I'm Sophia Thompson. I made the call before the party began. Everything happened very quickly after that. The officers separated everyone, taking statements in different rooms. My mother, initially attempting to defend my father, crumbled under questioning when confronted with the photographic evidence and recordings. She alternated between blaming me for provoking him and claiming she had been too afraid to intervene, her carefully constructed world disintegrating around her. My father, recognizing the severity of his situation, attempted to leverage his legal connections, demanding calls to judges and police superiors, but the officers were professional and unmoved by his threats or attempts at camaraderie. Frank Thompson, Officer Ryan stated, reading him his rights, as she handcuffed him in front of his colleagues and friends. The ultimate humiliation for a man whose public image had been everything. As they led him toward the front door, he locked eyes with me one final time. "You will regret this," he hissed. "You are nothing without this family. Nothing." I stepped forward, finding strength I never knew I possessed. "No, Dad. You are nothing without your facade. And now everyone can see exactly who you really are." The guests departed in shocked silence, the birthday celebration forgotten in the wake of the scandal unfolding before them. My mother locked herself in her bedroom, the sounds of breaking glass suggesting she had found her hidden wine supply. I stood in the empty living room, surrounded by half-eaten cake and discarded gift wrap, feeling strangely light, as though a physical weight had been lifted from my body. Outside, I could see Olivia waiting in her car as planned, ready to take me to her home for the night before my journey to New York the following day. Before leaving, I walked through the house one final time, this prison that had contained my entire existence for 18 years. I took nothing but the documents I needed, the evidence that would ensure my father could never hurt me again, and the small shell from Cape Cod, a reminder that, even in the darkest places, moments of light can exist. At the front door, I paused for one last look. "Goodbye," I whispered. Not to the house or even to my parents, but to the frightened girl I had been. She would not be coming with me to New York. In her place stood someone new. Someone who had discovered her own power in the most painful way possible, but who would never surrender it again. I stepped outside, closing the door firmly behind me, and walked toward Olivia's waiting car without looking back. 1 year later, I sat at a small desk in my New York apartment, watching rain streak down the window as I put the finishing touches on an article for the university newspaper. My tiny studio in Brooklyn was nothing like the spacious bedroom I'd left behind in Boston. But every square inch of it was mine, filled with choices I had made, reflecting the person I was becoming rather than the one I had been forced to be. The journey of healing had not been linear or easy. There were nights I woke up drenched in sweat, the phantom sensation of my father's hands around my throat so real I had to turn on all the lights and remind myself he was hundreds of miles away, no longer able to hurt me. There were days when a raised voice in the street or an unexpected touch would send me spiraling into panic, my body remembering what my mind was trying to process. But I was getting better, piece by piece, day by day. The trauma therapist I saw weekly at the University Counseling Center had helped me understand that recovery was not about forgetting or even necessarily forgiving, but about reclaiming my life from the shadow of abuse. Trauma changes the brain, Dr. Patel explained during one of our sessions. But so does healing. Every time you make a choice for yourself, every time you practice self-compassion, you are literally rewiring neural pathways. You are taking back what was stolen from you. The support group for survivors of family violence became another cornerstone of my healing. Twice a month, I sat in a circle with men and women whose stories echoed parts of mine, whose eyes held the same mixture of pain and determination. We shared strategies for managing flashbacks, celebrated small victories, and reminded each other that we were not defined by what had been done to us. "You are not alone in this," Mia, the group facilitator, often reminded us. "And you are more than your worst experiences." News about my father reached me occasionally, filtered through Sarah Jenkins, who had become both my legal advocate and a mentor. His arrest that night had been just the beginning. Once the first cracks appeared in his carefully constructed image, the entire facade collapsed with stunning speed. Multiple ethics violations came to light as the Bar Association investigation deepened. Former clients came forward with accounts of mishandled funds. A former legal secretary revealed a pattern of workplace harassment stretching back years. My medical records, finally obtained when I sought proper treatment for my improperly healed jaw, provided irrefutable evidence of the physical abuse I had endured. Frank Thompson, once the respected attorney and community pillar, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for domestic violence, financial crimes, and witness intimidation. His law license was permanently revoked. The man who had controlled every aspect of my existence was now confined to a cell smaller than my studio apartment. His power stripped away completely. My mother's journey took a different path. After my father's arrest, she checked herself into a rehabilitation facility for alcohol dependency. During her 90-day program, she sent me a letter, the first communication between us since I had left. "I failed you in every way a mother could fail a child," she wrote. "I cannot ask for your forgiveness because I do not deserve it. But I want you to know that I am trying to understand how I became the kind of woman who would watch her husband hurt her child and do nothing. I do not recognize that person anymore, and I never want to be her again." I read the letter several times before placing it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to respond. Not sure if I ever would be. The therapist assured me this was normal. That reconciliation, if it ever happened, would need to come on my timeline, not hers. "Your only obligation is to your own healing," Dr. Patel reminded me, "not to anyone else's expectations or timelines." My first published article appeared in the university newspaper at the beginning of spring semester, a piece about recognizing the warning signs of domestic violence in teenage relationships. I didn't use my own story directly, but the knowledge and insight I had gained through my experiences informed every paragraph. The editor asked me to make it a regular column, focusing on different aspects of relationship dynamics and personal safety. I was invited to speak at local high schools about dating violence and family abuse, sharing warning signs and resources without revealing the full extent of my personal history. Standing before classrooms of teenagers, seeing recognition flash in certain eyes, I understood that my experiences, however painful, had given me a voice that could potentially help others avoid similar situations. Miss Harrison visited me in New York during spring break, bringing news of Olivia, who had started college in Boston but stayed far away from my former neighborhood. Over coffee in a small cafe near Washington Square Park, my former teacher and I talked about the future rather than the past. "I always knew you had exceptional strength," she told me. "But watching you rebuild your life after everything you've been through. I am simply in awe of you, Sophia." I shook my head. "I just did what I had to do to survive." "That is exactly what strength is," she replied. "Doing what needs to be done, even when it seems impossible." Mr. Davis, my high school counselor, sent an email expressing both regret that he hadn't been able to help more and pride in how I had ultimately helped myself. "You showed remarkable courage," he wrote. "I have changed how I approach students I suspect might be in troubling home situations because of what I learned from your case." I made new friends in New York, slowly and cautiously at first, testing the waters of trust with tiny steps. My roommate, Zoe, became the sister I had never had, perceptive enough to recognize when I needed space and kind enough to ensure I was never alone when the darkness threatened to overwhelm me. And then there was Ethan, a photography student I met in a creative writing elective. Our relationship developed with glacier-like slowness, each step forward deliberate and discussed. He never pushed when I established boundaries, never took offense when certain topics triggered withdrawal. When I finally told him my full story, 6 months into our friendship and 2 weeks into tentative dating, he listened without interruption, without judgment, without the pity I had feared. "Thank you for trusting me," was all he said when I finished, reaching for my hand with a gentleness that brought tears to my eyes. With the settlement from the civil case against my father and the scholarship covering most of my tuition, I had enough financial stability to focus on my studies and healing. I even started a small foundation to provide emergency funds for young adults escaping abusive homes, naming it Next Chapter, to emphasize that surviving abuse was not the end of anyone's story. Sitting at my desk that rainy afternoon, completing my article, I reflected on everything that had brought me to this moment. The pain had been real, the damage significant. I still carried scars, visible and invisible. But I also carried strength I never knew I possessed, wisdom earned through terrible experience, and a profound understanding of both human cruelty and resilience. The true power, I had learned, was not in controlling others, as my father had tried to do, but in reclaiming control of my own life. Not in silencing others, but in finding and using my own voice. Not in creating fear, but in overcoming it. My jaw had healed, though slightly crooked, a permanent reminder of that final violent night. But now I used it to speak truths, to tell stories that mattered, to advocate for those still trapped in situations similar to what I had escaped. The instrument of speech my father had tried to break had become my greatest tool for change. As I submitted my finished article, I opened my window slightly, letting in the petrichor scent of rain on city streets. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new steps in the continuing journey of healing. But for the first time in my life, I faced the future without fear, knowing that whatever came, I had the strength to meet it. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from scratch or found strength you didn't know you had during difficult times? Thank you for listening to my story. Take care. Good luck.